Welcome to NFL Daily, where we're gonna look great in silver and black. I'm Gregg Rosenthal, and I'm talking to my buddy Nick Shook just hours before the negotiating period between NFL teams and free agents officially begin. And yet, Nick, it's already started. We got trades. We got big free agent signings. We've got an arrest, and we'll throw that in the mix as well. And we got a million re-signings. Cap space is being spent like absolute crazy. And yes, I'm referring to what my new favorite team, the Raiders, did acquiring Geno Smith. No one I'd rather talk about all this stuff to than you, Nick.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. The last 6 hours here on Sunday, it's just been absolute chaos. And it's only going to get more chaotic as the week begins. But we have so much to talk about, so let's not even waste any time and get right into it.
Yeah, that's it. We're going to try to speed through this because, look, this week is going to move fast. We have shows every day. Obviously, keep it tuned to NFL Network for Free Agency Frenzy. I'm going to be doing insiders all week, and we'll have daily shows. And look, these are the moves that we're going to be talking about for the next 4 or 5 months. More news happened on Sunday than will happen from May through July. So we'll give you the top line stuff. And yes, it was a week-end-long battle between what would lead the show. I figured it's just going to be Geno. That's what I'm referring to. For new listeners, I love me some Geno Smith. I don't know if the Raiders are going to be my favorite team, but I'm definitely pulling for them. But then it was Davante Adams who took away the beginning of the show, going to the Rams. Thought that's fresher. We got to lead with that. I mean, Myles Garrett staying, that was a good candidate. But ultimately, we're actually going back to the Pacific Northwest because it's not just Geno Smith that's no longer in Seattle. DK Metcalf is a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. All they had to give up was a second-round draft pick in terms of trade compensation, but they did have to give up a $150 million contract total. It was an extension 4 for $132, and it's the type of move the Steelers just haven't made that often in the Mike Tomlin era, so I know Steelers fans are going to be pumped. But they have made it before. Remember, they sent a first for Minkah Fitzpatrick. That worked out well. Do you think this one will work out just as well?
I mean, DK was underused in Seattle last year. The question for me is fit because of receiver type, but this is also a Steelers offense that was going to benefit from any acquisition of any receiver. They heavily leaned on George Pickens, Russell Wilson especially last year. Calvin Austin was probably their next best option. It just kind of fell off a cliff from there. You add DK to the mix. Now you can't just focus all your attention on, we got to stop Pickens. We got to take Pickens away and deal with Pat Freiermuth. Now we got to deal with both of these guys. Big targets, big playmakers, one more of a spectacular catch maker than the other, slightly more in Pickens. And I think it just helps them overall. But the other question is who's throwing them the ball now? It's fantastic, but who's going to throw them the football? We still have to find that out.
Yeah, someone will. And that's what I'd caution with all these moves. Although I understand why Seattle fans are so frustrated right now. They were not happy with the Geno Smith trade. It's not fun to see DK Metcalf go out the window. I share your frustration, and I'm skeptical of where this is going. And yet, I would caution to wait till the end of this week, at the very least, to see what the full plan is going to be. Ultimately, DK Metcalf should be a Steeler for longer than George Pickens. In a world where George Pickens gets it all together, he gets a long-term deal, and they're both working there together, going deep down the field. Heck, that would work pretty well with Russell Wilson, not Justin Fields, but it'd probably work even best with a quarterback that's in college right now, or maybe is even in the draft. What I found fascinating about this is that the Seahawks didn't want to give DK Metcalf that contract. And so when people say, what, they only got a second for DK? They only got a third for Geno? I want to stop making this point over and over. But the reason the draft compensation is not that high is because it's the contract. They're getting off that salary. They do not want to give DK Metcalf that contract, or probably anything close to it. He wanted, and now was the time to pay him that contract. And so it's a team willing to give him that money, which again, I'm a little surprised that it's the Steelers. Plus the pick, and ultimately they get a second round pick where they took DK Metcalf. Back in the day when him and his boy A.J. Brown were for some reason ignored by draftniks in the NFL, despite being two Greek gods who were very good in college. I'm surprised you can't be thrilled with it as a Browns fan either. It doesn't seem like a normal type of Steelers move.
No, it's not. But it also indicates where the Steelers are as a franchise, which is, look, we kind of allowed ourselves to be in a position where we didn't have quality options opposite George Pickens last year. We don't know if George Pickens is ever going to figure it all out mentally and emotionally. We know he's an incredibly talented player. So why not go get a guy who at least has proven that he can handle that? Now, that's not to say that DK hasn't caused his own drama, because he has in Seattle. But maybe with that money and a change of scenery and the right quarterback, it all gets eased and it ends up being a great move. But it definitely, to me, says the Steelers are not okay with just making the playoffs anymore. They actually want to win that playoff game.
You know what's interesting? I've noticed there's been no reporting on the guaranteed money on DK Metcalf's deal yet. That is usually a sign that it's more team friendly than you expect. So you hear 5 for 150 right overall. It's 30 per year, right near the top. But the extension is actually 4 for 132, even higher. That's probably backloaded. Maybe the guaranteed money isn't actually up there with some of the very best receivers in the league. That's why we're not getting the reporting on it yet. We'll see. DK didn't get everything he wanted. He wanted to play for a warm weather city. He wanted to play for a contender. He went 1-ish for 2. I mean, they're kind of a contender.
Yeah, I'll give him 1.
I mean, they're kind of the AFC Seahawks, a 9-10 win type of team. Now, DK also wanted to go somewhere with a more stable quarterback situation, reportedly. He must have known Geno was on his way out from Seattle, because that was a day before that. He did not land somewhere. The Seahawks getting off Geno and DK is so risky for John Schneider. And let's transition to Geno there, because I think you got to view these in tandem. 40s and free agents, the new podcast. Got a lot of great feedback. Appreciate everyone that listened. If you missed it, I'm doing a new podcast with Daniel Jeremiah. Should be in the NFL Daily feed. And he really thought during that show that Geno was going somewhere. I threw out the Raiders were just the logical pick, but DJ was all over that. They didn't want to pay Geno the extension that he was due either. And they got him for a late third, the 92nd pick in the draft. We haven't seen the reports on what Geno's going to get financially, but supposedly he's getting a multi-year offer. I think it's safe to say he'll have guaranteed money through at least 2 years of the deal. And the Seahawks weren't willing to do that. And suddenly this mini era in Seattle, which I think the fans really enjoyed. They were like a fun hipster team, but didn't really go anywhere, but overachieved. Suddenly he's gone. And you just wonder, Mike Macdonald was very out there saying Geno was his guy. He's not going anywhere. Without knowing too much, I do wonder, is the coach and the GM totally aligned on this? Clearly, the coach has to be down with whatever the plan is, but I believe John Schneider holds a really heavy stick there. He is one of the more powerful GMs in the league, and he did not want Geno and DK long-term, apparently. A little surprising.
Yeah, well, I think with the DK, requesting the trade, the drama that had preceded him with not getting enough targets early in the season and everything else that they've dealt with, I can understand that. You don't want to hand him that contract. You might want to invest that elsewhere. But with Geno...
And slightly limited player before we move on.
Yes.
He is a top 20 receiver, maybe even top 15, but he's not A.J. Brown. He's not Davante Adams in his prime. He can't do everything. He's very good at what he does. All right, sorry for cutting you off.
And he's not going to make the money that some of those other guys are going to make, even if he wants it. So I understand trying to rid yourself of that drama and trying to capitalize on what he's worth. They were never going to get a 1 for him, by the way, because of, like you said, the contract. So I think this is decent compensation for him. Only a 2, I guess, whatever. But with Geno, what that signals to me is that we realize we've maximized what we've gotten out of him. We realized that when he was on the team as a backup and then proved himself to be good enough to be a starter, we rewarded him. We gave him the contract extension, but it wasn't super long term. It was 3 years. And we saw him play good enough to keep us competitive. And we both love Geno here. But we also can admit that Geno was inconsistent or a little bit volatile at times, especially last season. There were some games in which, the Rams game, for example, where his mistakes cost them a game. And in a tight division race, you can't afford that. The problem with that, though, is what is your alternative? You throw yourself into a very precarious position, but I understand why you might want to move on. And it also speaks to the Raiders knowing that they don't like Aiden O'Connell and they need something better because they want to be competitive now.
We'll get to the Raiders side of it in a second. And these were the biggest moves of the weekend in terms of shifting completely what you think of two organizations in terms of the Geno trade and the Seahawks organization even more getting rid of DK. First of all, how dare you talk about that Rams game? I challenge you to go watch the first 3 quarters of that game and tell me who the better quarterback was in that game, Geno or Matthew Stafford. He blew up at the end, but that game was typical. He blew
up at the end.
Yeah, he did, and Stafford flipped it. That game was typical, and I know there's like a Geno fan in me that's obviously biased, but there's a lot of Seahawks fans that are there too, and there's a lot of people that I think know a lot about football that aren't fans, particularly of either, that recognize how Geno was playing with one hand behind his back for most of his Seattle run, including last year. Like all the numbers, like the on-target throw percentage, things like that. The next level things that he's asked to do are so high level, and his numbers when he's not against pressure are outstanding, and his ability to survive against quick pressure statistically were outstanding. And that was the case in that Rams game, for instance. There's part of us out there, the Geno hive, that worries Seattle's now, gonna fix their offensive line. Whoever comes in there next is actually they're gonna invest in the offensive line. The scheme with Clint Kubiak is gonna make more sense and protect the quarterback a little bit, and it won't be the tough situation that Geno played with. We will see. There is part of me that wants to at least slightly defend Seattle in terms of what they're thinking. I think it's gonna be very hard for them to find a quarterback better than Geno Smith for this year or next. I do think they need to, think about restarting in terms of a young player at the position. And I do think bringing in Clint Kubiak, this was as dramatic a scheme change, and Geno's been through a different one basically every year. He's, the last 3 or 4 years there. Does he fit that Shanahan style, back to the defense, like, wide zone and what Kubiak wants to do? Is he like the perfect quarterback for that scheme compared to, let's say, Sam Darnold at potentially half the price or 2/3 of the price? That's what I expect to happen. That's what everyone expects to happen at this point. The money is going to be very interesting. That to me is at least a reasonable thought, even though I believe Geno to be a superior overall quarterback for that scheme and where they are. Neither one of them maybe is their long-term answer, and they'll spend that money elsewhere. If you're a Seahawks fan, I think that's at least what you're hoping for.
Yeah, both can be and are true. And I think that it's just an example of Schneider realizing that we need to retool, like you just said, and also accepting the fact that you're not going to invest long-term money when the fit is not there. So I think that they're first in line for Sam Darnold, but the thing is that's not guaranteed. We saw what he did in his last 2 games. So if their goal is invest in the offensive line, give him solid protection, and then he fits the scheme better, then I see the vision. The next question, though, is who is he throwing to? Because all you have left now, legitimately, is Jackson Smith and Jigba. Now, are you a team that's suddenly in the receiver market in the draft and you want to go grab another Ohio State guy in Emeka Ibuka? I mean, that would work out for perfectly fine, but you're still lacking a little bit now. Then again, all you really need is 2 and a tight end, and they've got that. That's what Sam Darnold did in Minnesota, and it worked out great. So I see the vision.
Jackson Smith and Jigba is great, and I think his ascendance to the number 1 target in Seattle was part of that DK trade. Maybe DK wasn't going to handle that well.
He already kind of wasn't.
I also think you have to just look at Geno Smith's age. He's still balling. I disagree about him taking a step back last year. I thought he played fantastic last year. I thought his worst year in Seattle was 2023. That to me, especially the first half of that year, was concerning. And I thought he bounced back there. But the turnover where he plays really cranked up there. For the most part, though, I think his ceiling and his floor is consistently better than Sam Darnold. We had him on QB Island. I think he's been about a top to 10, 12 quarterback. But he's turning 35 this year. Not everyone is going to be Tom Brady. And so let's flip to the Raiders side of things, because I do want to get through this show and get it out there. Man, the Raiders, I think, made an absolutely awesome move here that should make everyone, including my trainer,
they're going to send you Steven, a jersey.
so happy. Because Geno can ball. And what is this cap space doing? I think the best deals in free agency, and this is kind of free agency for them, they gave up a late third, are these short-term veteran deals for guys who can play and just spends that cap space immediately. There's no dead money in the future. It's like Davante Adams. They just get better now it's not my money. They have $100 million in cap space. What is the point? Like literally, what is the point of that? They're so much better at the most important position. They would have been so much better. They would have been better with Jacoby Brissett. They would have been better with Sam Bradford. They're so much better with Geno. It's with a coach that got the best out of Geno, and I think it just gives them a chance. People are like, yeah, but they're not going to go to the Super Bowl. You're a Raiders fan. Like, you're going to be pumped if they win 9 or 10 games, or just know that you have a chance to win every game.
Yeah, the connections were there too. Obviously, Pete Carroll being the one who had him as his backup and realized that he would be the better option when they moved on from Russell Wilson. So that connection's obvious. And it's also the sense of urgency to turn this team from a bottom feeder into something that's at least watchable and fun to watch, and not depending on maybe drafting Shedeur Sanders or somebody else in the first round, giving yourself an immediate option to be competitive. Now, yes, you have other areas to address. You still have a tiny receiving core. You don't have a running back that you can rely on right now, but at least you have the quarterback. That's the first step. And
you got the rest of the week. You got the rest of the week for that. By the way, they also gave Adam Butler a 3-year, $15 million extension. A lot of guys that aren't big names getting extensions. More on that later. He's a defensive tackle for them. But the Raiders, they know ball. Who knows ball better than Pete Carroll? Who knows ball better than Tom Brady? Tom Brady was doing those Geno games, and he's like, that's a real quarterback. You have to say he's kind of like Tom Brady's handpicked guy after Stafford. They wanted Stafford first, but he gave the stamp. We heard that they really weren't that into Darnold. He was into Geno. And
understandable.
I think it is a statement a little bit on Shedeur Sanders, which is totally fair. Like, why would you expect most rookie quarterbacks that aren't a Jaden Daniels or a highly touted guy to step in and be as good as a guy like Geno, who's been borderline or actually making the Pro Bowl the last couple of years. So we'll see how the rest of the team build goes together, but love what they're doing. While we're with Seattle, before we go to the other big stories, just want to mention Ernest Jones is back with Seattle, 3 for 33. $15 million guaranteed. Like that contract. Off-ball linebackers suddenly are getting paid. Again, a bunch of them signed this weekend with their teams. I mentioned how it was a good off-ball linebacker class, and once a couple of them got contracts, they all slid in at similar money. So good for him after getting traded a couple times. And Jaron Reed, who is a good veteran player, got, quote, up to $25 million on a 3-year contract, but scant details there. It's probably more like a 1-year deal, but that's a guy that will help that defense. So again, it tells me Mike McDonald's kind of getting what he wants on the defensive side. I'm not sure he's getting what he wants on the offensive side. Let's go to another team in their division. Davante Adams is a member of the Rams. What are your thoughts on this one, Shucky?
Pure shock. I obviously he wanted to go to the West Coast. That was made very obvious and apparent when he moved on from the Jets. But so many Packer fans were holding out hope that he'd go back to Green Bay, and yet that doesn't get done. He goes to the Rams. He follows in the footsteps of, I guess, Odell Beckham Jr., but with more upside at this point in his career. And it all makes a lot of sense, and it also fills the void that you're expecting to exist when they move on from Cooper Kupp. So it's a perfect landing spot for him. He's a guy who followed Aaron Rodgers out of what was a terrible situation in Vegas to New York, didn't produce until the last 4 games of the year when it really didn't matter anymore. Now he goes with the team that made the divisional round of the playoffs, that has Matthew Stafford back. All the momentum's going in the Rams' direction. Your daughter's got to be pleased. The whole Rosenthal household has to be ecstatic. It's going to be fun. What a 1-2 punch. Davante Adams and Puka Nacua. Let's do it. 2 great round runners.
I was at a kid's birthday party at Dave & Buster's with my son. And I told a couple kids who I knew, including Walker, into football. And I told them, they're like, no way. Because there's only so many Davante Adamses out there that just have that sort of name value. I love this deal so much for the Rams. It's $26 million guaranteed, but it's only 2 for 52. I think it's 6 guaranteed into next year. So it's really a 1-year deal. And that looks like big money, but the way this market is shaking out, that's actually borderline 1-2 money. It's not even top tier 1 money. And I think that's where Davante Adams fits now. And maybe he fits even a little below that. But that's okay because of what I just said before about spending the cap space on short-term deals for veterans. They just brought Stafford back on a 1-year deal. Davante Adams, at worst, is one of the best number 2 receivers in the league immediately. And on this team, he's absolutely a number 2 receiver. You want to know why you can afford a number 2 receiver? this much, even when you're paying Tutu Atwell $10 million? Because Puka Nacua is a 5th-round pick. You're saving more money on Puka Nacua, compared to a number 1 receiver contract than you are with some of these quarterback contracts. So I just love it. I think like a couple of the dads at the party were like, yeah, but isn't he kind of a pain? Isn't he kind of a diva wanting ball?
No, he's actually not.
I was like, no, man, he's just a truly great player that if stuff is really mishandled around him, like he's going to want to get to a better situation. But I respect that because he's one of the smartest, most hardworking players of his generation.
Yep.
And I love this combination. Even if he's 80% of the old Davante, I'm in.
No, exactly like you said. Stafford on a 1-year deal. You are winning now. When your quarterback is on a 1-year deal and he's near the tail end of his career, but he can still produce, you are winning now. You make these moves now. It's a perfect fit. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be done either. They seem like they want to make a couple big moves. We'll see. Davante is great to get off the shelf. And if you're curious why this deal happened before free agency happened, we'll see it a little later with Harold Landry, for instance. Davante was cut, so he was free to sign over the last handful of days whenever any team wanted to get it done. And so they get it done before the rest of the free agents can go out and start talking to teams like we know Sam Darnold is already. I mean, he's already a Seahawk. I don't think they have to worry about that one. Let's take a quick break. We haven't even mentioned Myles Garrett and Josh Allen got massive extensions left in the show. Then we'll run through all the rest of the news and get you set up for free agency starting this week. Back on NFL Daily, and yeah, I have a feeling, Raiders GM John Spytek, he was invested in Steven the trainer. He wanted to know, does this trade pass the sniff test? And yes, Steven's thrilled about. Look,
when Greg's claiming that the Raiders of all teams know ball, football is back.
Well, if nothing else, I always thought the gear looked cool, so. I don't know. I'm not really going to wear Raiders gear, but I think Geno will look great in silver and black. Let's talk about players that are even better. Ones that are going to Canton. Josh Allen, out of nowhere, signed an extension on Sunday evening that paid him $250 million guaranteed. Congratulations to Browns general manager Andrew Berry. You're off the hook. Deshaun Watson, 3 years later, no longer the most guaranteed money in NFL history. It goes to a guy who can actually play football. Allen also getting the most cash flow over 4 years in the history of the NFL. That's according to Pro Football Talk. He'll make $55 per year average value. That's second only to Dak. Contract that might not be aging that well. This kind of came out of nowhere. I don't really know what to say about it other than, well, that's good for Josh Allen.
I mean, I guess it probably buys them more cap space in the short term to get some things done because they are very much in that title window still, which it feels like they've been there for 5 years now. But when you have an MVP at quarterback, first off, you pay him, and you pay him strategically so that you can continue to improve the roster, much like the Chiefs did with Patrick Mahomes. I think it's a smart move. It's a good team building move, and it's a no-brainer when it comes to the caliber of player he is.
Right, and he had signed just an extension a few years ago, so he was like basically towards the top. But you absolutely said it right. What it is part of a big strategy, and let's go through it. A couple of these teams had a lot going on this weekend. We'll call this Bills Corner. They released Von Miller. That was part of the move. A disastrous signing for them. One that we were all, at least I was, excited about at the time, and yet the warning signs were there considering his injury history. It really hamstrung them. I hate to say it, but it might have cost them some major playoff wins just because that resource could have been used somewhere else and he wasn't there helping on the field in the way that you expected. So he's gone. You save some cap space. They send some of that and some of the savings from Allen's extension, which will be saving cap space ultimately because it's spread out to 2030 on Greg Rousseau. Gets 4 years, $80 million, $56 million guaranteed. Terrell Bernard, a linebacker they've developed and plays quite well for them. All 3 downs, gets 50 over 4. We'll see
affordable.
Wow,
12 and a half. That's pretty nice.
I guess so, but it's one of those linebacker ones that I think set the market for the rest of them because that one was a little early off. And they're keeping we did the AFC East preview last week. We said, wow, all their like best young players are up for extension. And so kudos to them. We'll see if Rousseau and Bernard are worth it, but I tend to trust teams that are paying their own guys. Rousseau, more of a disruptor than like a great sack guy. But you know who he reminds me of a little bit is like a younger Brandon Graham or not in terms of his play style, but in terms of like, man, he's always up there on the hurries and hits list, but not on the sack list. And like those guys have value. And Graham ultimately kind of got there with his sacks and in game-changing moments, and Rousseau's a little bit like that.
Yeah, but I totally respect and appreciate them paying him because he's a guy that on tape you see the difference that he makes. And it doesn't show up in the numbers, but he's their most disruptive, like you said, edge rusher on that front. And now that you've freed yourself of the ghost that was Von Miller, you can redirect that money to him and reward the guy who is on, an ascending path, and then dedicate some of those other resources to guys like Bernard. And when you look at this front, like, you talk about needs and everything, I think about edge guys, and I'm like, I like Rousseau. I that's a good number. Like, I'm fine with that. That's decent.
At worst, he's like a good number 2 or a 1B. They still have needs there, but they weren't. We're seeing these trends are continuing all over the league. The smart teams are paying the guys a year early. I keep saying there's too much cap space. So now even more of my top 101, the middle and lower tier guys, they're getting re-signings in the negotiating period. They're not even making it to the market because teams are realizing like we shouldn't let anyone we even moderately like get out there. Who cares if we have to pay? We're not going to be able to spend all this cap space. One team that consistently spends more cash than just about any team, it is your Cleveland Browns. Myles Garrett is staying with the Browns, $122 million over 3 years, $123.5 million guaranteed. He goes over the top of Max Crosby in terms of guaranteed money, most for a defensive player ever. I fell for the okie doke. I was surprised. I'm not as concerned of whether you were surprised or not, Shook, but what do you think? Do you think this is the right move?
Yeah, because you don't let Hall of Fame generational talents at edge rusher demand their way out, because the compensation you get in that, it's like trading a great baseball player in his prime. It's never going to match. Like, if you hit on every guy, it's still not going to match what you're giving up. And I thought when Andrew Berry spoke with the Combine about this, he was steadfast in the fact that they were not interested in trading him. He's a big part of their plans and everything else. So it seemed like it just came down to convincing him to stay. And you know what convinces people, Greg? $40 million a year will convince you to stay. I don't know what else they told him. Maybe they told him their plan and he liked it. But I think that the power of the dollar was definitely significant in this one. And it essentially all but ensures that he'll probably finish his career there. And I mean, crazier things have happened. And from a football perspective, it makes all the sense in the world.
I think that the deal might not look great in the long run. We'll see.
Well, because at the back end, if he's 36 and, struggling, we'll
see. He's 40 years old. I mean, he's 30 years old. 40 would be wild. He's making $40 million a year. I just thought, if what you're saying is true, that you couldn't make up for what he was in a trade package, you're right. I guess I will never know that. I would think that Garrett could have gotten a good trade package, but you're right. There's a huge difference between getting 2 2s and a 5 and getting 2 1s and a 3. Like, I don't know where that offer was.
Or like who it's from. If it's from the Eagles
where
and
the
they're
ones
drafting
are from.
the back half of the first round, it's not worth it.
I don't know. But they're in a unique spot where, because of the Deshaun Watson contract, if they got a big return, I thought it did make football sense to not pay Myles Garrett $40 million a year and give him what he wants. I do wonder if the fact that, Andrew Berry and Stefanski, they got to win now, but especially the front office, that plays a role in it. They're not looking to rebuild. They just came off a disastrous season. They have to win, and clearly they're going to be better in 2025 with Myles Garrett. And I give Jimmy Haslam credit for being the type of owner that will just spend. He really does spend a ton of cash. It just hasn't been spent well, and so you hope hope for the the Browns rather, that they can figure out quarterback and that Myles Garrett isn't wasting these years. Because you're right, you're probably going to get 2 more great years out of him at the least.
Yeah, before he starts to decline. Yeah, of course. But like it just makes you can't weather that storm, that fire. Like no matter how, because Myles was painted like the bad guy in Cleveland over the last month, and understandably so because of the media tour he went on. But yeah. And
well, yeah, he was pretty aggro about it. And there was a report that Jimmy Haslam wouldn't even meet with him. And then suddenly this contract happens. It's interesting. I don't know.
It's an interesting example of ownership hardball where he's like, I hired a GM to do the job and I'm going to let him do the job and not, undermine him by talking to the player directly. I think if there's players you talk to directly, it's guys like Myles Garrett. But at the same time, like when you look at it from the full picture, they can't afford to have a losing season. Well, guess what? They can't afford to weather the storm of trading away Myles Garrett for 2 1s in the back end of the first round that are consecutive years and lose, 13 games again. Then they're all fired.
Right. I'm kind of amazed Andrew Berry's still there, but for the millionth time, look, who knows if he's the one that actually wanted Watson? Maybe it was ownership. Who cares? Let's go to, I'm just like, man, if you're all part of that, you just have to wear it. And that's just the reality of it. You just have to wear it. It's what they're all going to be remembered for unless they do something great moving forward. Stefanski will always have those coach of the year. He'll probably get another job too after Cleveland if he wants it. I'm going with Derek Carr is my next most important story of the weekend. Very interesting. He stayed with the Saints. He didn't change his contract. They had an automatic restructure that they could use, which just means he gets all the money up front and they push it out into the future. He reportedly refused to take a pay cut. They were trying to extend him another year, but while doing that, make him take a pay cut, but give him some guaranteed money for next year. He reportedly refused to, and it's being put out there that he was quite open to leaving and like calling their bluff. He's saying like, you want to cut me? Like, cut me. I'm kind of cool with that. Weird that gets out there. Just what? What are the Saints? Like, now you have a quarterback like you, I just don't get any of it. Like that, it almost is certain that now it's his last year with the Saints, but that's a weird way to go into the year because his cap number next year, is almost $70 million. Like they're not going to be able to renegotiate it next, like because they didn't do it this year, it almost sets up a situation where he has to be cut next year and have that money spread out. Just weird. I want better for the Saints fans out there.
Yeah.
I get the argument for it that they also put out there kind of through the media is that it's going to open up space for them to spend more on free agency this year than you would expect. So we'll see.
Because his cap number is only in the $20 million range. And so you can redirect some of that cap space to try to get better immediately. It's also essentially a stare down that turned into, well, you're our bridge quarterback now. So enjoy your last year here, and hopefully you play well enough to earn a deal elsewhere after we get rid of you next year. Because you don't want to put a new head coach in a terrible position where you don't have a quarterback or you have a rookie. So it makes sense from that perspective, but it is still kind of strange. But that's where the Saints are.
But you just put him in a position where he has a quarterback that he maybe didn't want. Our guys at the Saints Block Party podcast, reported that Moore didn't really want it. Mickey Loomis is calling the shots here. And more importantly, like now you're giving him a quarterback that you only have for 1 year. That's probably not your future. And frankly, I'd be shocked if they don't draft a quarterback. To me, they're the odds-on favorite for Shedeur Sanders. That's my hot draft take.
But what is the alternative? The alternative is Spencer Rattler and Shedeur Sanders.
I'd rather cut Derek Carr, take your pain, and sign someone that's basically as good as Derek Carr, Jacoby Brissett, or whoever. Like, what's the difference?
That's fair. But at $20 million, how much are you really saving by cutting him now? Like, it's the cap number this year is what makes it possible, which is why it's weird. they are going to try to win this year, and they'll do it by using some of this cap space with 1 more year of Derek Carr. Just like it's just one of, from the outside, the most confounding organizations in the league. And it's not like it's going well post Sean Payton. They sold their soul to the football devil when they extended Breeze and pushed all that money down the road, and they're still paying for it. Sure.
But Carr is different. He's Derek Carr. Ronnie, I think he was interested in what was behind door number 2, which makes you wonder, like, what was that? Was it Was it Tennessee? Was it New York? I think he did have a market, and I think he knew it. Ronnie Stanley is staying with the Ravens. Shout out to Jordan Rodriguez, who pointed to the signs that he maybe didn't want to test what was out there. $44 million guaranteed, 3 for 60. Great money for a guy whose career was in trouble because of health concerns, but not a crazy huge deal. Kind of like the Steelers, and we'll see with the DK once we peek under the hood. The Ravens always get like better deals than you expect. And this is like a little better deals. It's almost like they get a discount for being so smart. I'm sure he could have gotten more from the Patriots. How dare you?
Yeah, I want to say I had him expected in like the $25 to $27 million range after the year he had. And this is an example of betting on yourself paying off, because he took a pay cut to stay because he knew he wasn't worth the money they were spending, and because he just couldn't be available enough. And then he went and had a great year, a fantastic year. And he, instead of going for the biggest dollar value, he instead stays with the team that he knows well, that has trusted him and given him the time, just as he's given them the concession of financially. And now he gets rewarded at a number that's not extreme, and it's feasible, and it fits into what the organization wants to do.
Yep. Good organizations stay good by making moves like this. One less thing to worry about. They have plenty more to work on for the offensive line and the edge group. We'll see what they do this week. All right, the rest of the stories that we talk about today, and there's a lot of deals, would probably lead the show or be second on the show for most of the next 3 months. The funny thing is, like, the entire offseason is going to happen over the next 3 or 4 days, and a lot of it's already happened, and then we'll spend like 5 months talking about it. But the Chiefs were very active. Nick Bolton back for 3 years, $45 million. See, it's all very similar. Ernest Jones. We'll have Jamie Sherwood coming up for the Jets. 3 years, $45 million. Glad they kept him. Really a linchpin to their defense. Hollywood Brown is back for the same contract he signed for a year ago, basically 1 year for $11 million. And I'll stop there before getting into Xavier Worthy's arrest. I think they really wanted Ronnie Stanley. That's what Daniel Jeremiah was hinting around at. And look, he hinted around at multiple things to me on and off air. Every single one of them has happened except for Ronnie Stanley. And that makes me think that they saw or knew that the price was being driven up by their rivals, the Chiefs, and the Ravens, stepped up to the plate. That is what I expect to happen. But they used some of that money on Nick Bolton, Hollywood Brown. Smart moves.
Yeah, absolutely. Hollywood Brown didn't get to come back to the team until the second half of the season, so he never really got his feet underneath him. And then they were in the Super Bowl and had a dreadful performance. But it does hurt me that they don't address tackle and they don't get the opportunity to swing at a guy like Ronnie Stanley.
They got more time. They got more time.
They have time. They have time. And Nick Bolton, I think, the Nick Bolton thing's weird because we've talked about this. I think we talked about this in the tag primer, where he makes big time plays in key spots, but play-by-play basis, he's not like the most consistent. He's actually like kind of declined in that regard, but he's one of theirs. He's one of their homegrown, and you get him at 15 a year, which is like Terrell Bernard's 12 and a half. I mean, it's still pretty good for a guy who's still very young, who you expect to develop more. So both make sense, totally different moves, both fit into the grand scheme of this franchise, but they still have a lot of work to do. I
can hear Claybon's voice in my head laughing that I think Hollywood Brown coming back is a good move. His speed changed their offense. He's a good secondary receiver. He has already learned the scheme. Worthy, who was arrested over the weekend for a domestic violence incident that involved strangulation at his house, including a family member. Those were the details from the Williamson County Sheriff's Office. Has ultimately, they decided to release a statement that says the following: after further investigation and further discussion with a third-party witness, Mr. Worthy and his attorneys, this case is being declined at this time pending completion of the investigation by the Williamson County Sheriff's Office. So right now he was arrested, but the case is now being declined, but they are investigating him. Those are very serious allegations. We'll see what happens. If he's on the field, him, Rashee Rice, and Hollywood Brown, with Travis Kelce and Noah Gray, maybe they'll add to that, but that's a receiver group. That's a rock solid receiver group. And it's not to dismiss the seriousness of these allegations, but at this point they were declined, so it's hard to really speak on that. But man, the Chiefs, they have a lot of guys that have a lot of issues off the field. It's a little bit by design.
Yeah,
It really
I would
is.
agree. They take risks, and sometimes it pays off on the football field, and sometimes it doesn't. And that is part of the risk.
Yep. Commander's Corner. Jonathan Allen. We haven't even done a show since he got released, unless I snuck that into the DJ show. I'm losing track of days. So he is out there on the free agent wire, and he's in my top 45 now. I think he can help a team out as a helpful rotational end. They brought back Zach Ertz for 1 year, $6.25 million, and they brought back Bobby Wagner for $8 million guaranteed.
They've already made the trade for Debo. They bring back a veteran leader on both sides of the ball. I mean, that defense overachieved last year, and a lot of it was because of Bobby Wagner, and the offense kept moving because Jaden Daniels could rely on Zach Ertz in key moments. So both of them earned these contracts. They're both short-term. They make a lot of sense, and they're obviously attacking this with the Debo trade, and I don't think they're not even close to finished yet.
They were rumored to be in the mix for DK. That's what I heard.
And I still think that they can consider something like that.
Who knows how much DK had a role to play in this? I mean, he wanted to play somewhere warm, and he ended up in Pittsburgh. Look, if you want to play somewhere warm, you want to live somewhere warm, you just got to make it a priority. That was my number one priority for college. I wanted to go somewhere warm, and I made it happen.
I went to a state school in Ohio.
I wanted to go to a warm city. I was like, I want to go live in a city, and I want to go somewhere warm. Kids out there that are listening, I actually think that was pretty solid thinking.
Yes, if you grow up on the East Coast or the Midwest, leave your state for school. I promise you it'll work out.
And look, Ertz and Wagner could fall off a cliff this year, but that's why I keep saying this is the benefit of having the Commanders specifically having so much cap space. It doesn't matter if they're a little overpaid or they're off a cliff. They wanted them back, and they've got more than enough to spend. Lions Corner. They cut Za'Darius Smith. Very surprised about that. Derek Barnes, who I didn't put in the top 101 because he's coming off a serious injury, gets 3 for $25 million. He's kind of a hybrid linebacker, edge rusher, but more of a linebacker. And then they brought back Marcus Davenport, who didn't end up playing for them really last year, 1 for 4, who did sneak into the end of my 101. An interesting set of moves, none of which I particularly expected. Za'Darius Smith, I thought, played pretty well for them, but maybe they just didn't see him as a scheme fit or something, or just wanted to prioritize some younger guys like Barnes and Davenport, even that they know better.
Yeah, it's prioritizing younger guys, and I think that they're still looking to make some sort of splash. Might be more in name value than actual player quality, but there is some talent out there, and they know that they need to upgrade that position opposite Aiden Hutchinson when he returns from that broken leg. I mean, yeah, Za'Darius played pretty well. Like he played like the guy you traded for in the middle of the season, but I don't think that's good enough for them, and they understand that. So
Mike Gesicki, top tight end to me in free agency, is back with the Bengals. So the Bengals spending some money, 3 for $25 million. Nice career comeback for Gesicki, who is starting to bounce around. And I thought before that Bengals contract was borderline not staying in the league, and had a great year. And Trey Hendrickson has said there's nowhere he'd rather be than Cincinnati, but he is on the trade block. The reports are that the Commanders are in the mix, the Falcons and the Cardinals, depending on which local reporter, which national reporter you believe, have also been mentioned. So that's an interesting one. Vikings Corner here. Aaron Jones gets $13 million for 2025. Shout out to Aaron Jones. I like him, but that shows how much they really valued him. 2 for 20 overall. Pretty top end running back money. Like a little surprise there, but I ranked him high, so I like the deal. And then since we've last talked, Nick, Darnold not expected back. That was thrown out there even before the Geno trade. It really makes me think like all these teams kind of know there's the whisper markets out there. Suddenly Darnold was not expected back. That was before the Geno trade even happened. He must have had that contract offer in place. Supposedly they're into Danny Dimes. We'll see. Remember, they did have him back as their backup. I mean, he would be a backup in that scenario.
2 items before. Hendrickson, I want to pair him with the team we just talked about, the Lions. I don't think that market is only those 3 teams. They all make sense. Ooh. But I do want to pay him there. And then the Aaron Jones thing, 30-year-old, right? So like the 30-year wall, but he had like 1,500 scrimmage yards last year, and he fit in really well, and he loves it there. So I see why they front load that and say, all right, well, we'll give you this year, and then if you still play well, then we have you even cheaper next year. That makes a lot of sense as well. Now, on the other hand, the idea of being in on Danny Dimes, He could be reclaimed somewhere, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, let's save that till he actually does sign. I do have a lot of thought. I agree with you. He's not the same Dimes that he was 4 years ago. He's had massive injuries, but they had him in the building. They got to evaluate him. We'll see what the money is there. I really think J.J. McCarthy is the week 1 starter if Danny Dimes is the other guy there. All right, sure. I'm going to fly through the rest of these because I do want to wrap up here tonight. If you really want to jump in, do it. But Harold Landry got a major deal from the Patriots. So he was released by the Titans on Thursday, and he got $26 million guaranteed, 3 for $43 million. Patriots fans are like, hey, we need Mike Vrabel in charge. Can't have Elliott Wolf running things. We need Vrabel to
go get a former Titan.
To get like Harold Landry, a declining player that no one wanted to trade for, that is in PFF's bottom 10 percentile in terms of pass rush rate over the last couple of years, but he does get a lot of sacks. He is a good run defender. I don't know. It was the type of signing that Belichick would have made when it wasn't going well late. We'll see. It's a lot of money. I know they have a lot of money to spend, but
he's a Vrabel guy though. So
he is a Vrabel guy. The Bucs re-signed Davante David for $9 million guaranteed. Love Davante David. Did show decline last year, but he's earned that money. Baron Browning is back with the Cardinals 2 for 15. So they trade for him at midseason. Saw enough of him to get him back at a pretty low cost deal. Didn't want to bet on himself. Probably had an idea he wasn't going to do better. I keep mentioning these lower tier guys are getting signed now in the negotiating period when they normally wouldn't. The Falcons signed Jake Matthews to an extension, 2 for $45, $38 million guaranteed. I present to you my theory, Shook, that he is the offensive lineman version of Kirk Cousins. What slightly better than average player has made more money than Jake Matthews? I mean,
and he just got more money per year than Ronnie Stanley.
Right. Ugh. And it was tacked on to a deal that his contract is almost like the Derek Carr contract, where it's like they keep having to extend it out to make up for what was before and help their cap space. And then just some one-liners here. Since we last talked, the Chargers got rid of Gus Edwards. The Gus bus is loose. The Raiders got rid of their starting center, Andre James. The Panthers re-signed a handful of players, including Austin Corbett and Tommy Tremble, their tight end. Chris Manhertz, and then Jamie Gillen, the Scottish Hammer, is back with the Giants. Let's go. The Trey Smith signed his franchise tag, which does that make him easier to trade? Just something to think about.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Something to think about. Maybe not. Maybe just want to lock in that money before something weird happened. Jarrett Stidham is staying with the Broncos, 2 for 12. He's been getting those backup quarterback. He's kind of the sneaky Chase Daniel of his era, making a lot of money as a backup. Austin Hooper returns to the Pats for $5 million. We're going to have so much on Monday. The schedule this week, Shook, you're going to be back on Wednesday. That's officially the first day of the league year. Could have some more trades by then. Monday figures to be really busy. Obviously, we got you covered on NFL Network. I'm going to be on the Insiders if you guys happen to watch that on the network. And then we wanted to tape towards the end of the day. That's going to be the schedule so that we get everything that we can into that show, at least on Monday. So Patrick Claybon and I will be taping late in the evening, West Coast time. So these shows will be coming out a little later the first couple of days of the week, but we will be doing a show. It's in the title every day this week. Great cast of characters. Colleen and Jordan will be in for Tuesday's show. And football, it was making me think, Shook, it's a little like the difference between football and baseball in general. It's like the season's like the baseball is like game after game, day after day after day. Whereas football, it's just like Sunday. It's just like an orgasm of sport. And that's what free agency is too, compared to baseball, which just drags on. There's some early, there's some late, there's some whatever. It's like football, it's all done and then you can get to bed.
Look, I'm going to tread carefully here, but I would think I would rather do it all in a few days and really just go for broke than be like, oh, it's Saturday at 4 p.m. and so just signed with the Yankees. Cool.
It is one of my favorite weeks on the NFL calendar. Looking forward to it. Thanks again to Shooky. Let's play it out. What is it? It's noon on the East Coast, 9 a.m. Pacific. I mean, by the time you guys hear this, some more signings will be coming. I mean, yes, when we're reshaping the entire freaking NFL, football, it's back.